All right, Geaux Rouge peeps. I am here with Liz from BRAC, Baton Rouge Area Chamber, as always on Tuesdays, talking a little bit about what's going on. And, you know, just because we're entering into phase one doesn't mean we stop having conversations about the wonderful COVID-19. So today, we're getting a break from Adam Knapp. And by the way, you know, I don't want to pit you two against each other, Liz, but we love having you on the show.
Well, thanks, Franz.
So today we're going to touch on a few things, right? We're going to talk about childcare, phase one, and then we're going to talk education a little bit. So Liz, let's, and also, of course, any updates you guys have on the dashboard or anything like that. So the floor is yours, Ms. Smith. What do you want to chat about?
Well, why don't we talk about the reopening first? I mean, I think that's what's on everybody's mind. It's coming on Friday, and what do we do, right?
Yeah, that's the positive. So
I think the big thing coming out of that is what does phase one really mean, right? You know, you look at the White House plan and then the press event that the governor had yesterday. You know, there was a lot of information there, and so sort of what are the key takeaways that we all need to be paying attention to? I think are probably this 25% occupancy rate is going to be a big deal, right? Everybody essentially is limited to 25% occupancy rate unless you were an essential industry.
So can you talk about, and again, I'm in lawyer mode, and as a lawyer, you'll appreciate that. So I'm asking questions I kind of know the answers to. How is that 25% occupancy rate determined for a business? Is it number of people, or is it a square footage thing, or?
It's both and. So the State Fire Marshal office determines occupancy rate, and it's based on the square footage. It's based on how you're going to use the building. It's based on things like, do you have seating built into your building, right? So when they decide occupancy rate for like a theater or for a church, they figure in that like the pews are nailed down and the seats are attached to the floor, things like that. So we did post a briefing yesterday. You can find that on our website, brac.org/recovery, that has information on how occupancy rates are determined and where you can go to get more information. But the big thing is, and for most businesses, what you will do is you will look for your posted occupancy rate. So buildings are required to have the occupancy rate posted within them in a prominent place. If you can't find that, you know, you'd want to look to your original building plans or your certificate of inspection, your certificate of occupancy. It can be on all of those documents. If you still can't find it, there's a couple other things you can do. Contact your municipality or your fire department, right? So here in East Baton Rouge, you can call the city parish, or you can call whatever fire department you happen to be in. And then the governor, of course, created OpenSafely.gov. And OpenSafely.gov is a place where you can go as a business owner, you can register your business, and what that will do is sign you up for information related to all the phases of reopening. And although it was so overwhelmed last night that when I tried to put in a fake business so that I could find my fake occupancy rate, I couldn't actually do it. But I do hope that that has calmed down now. And I am told that you should be able to find more occupancy data there as well.
So phase one would presumably, and this is going to sound stupid, lead us to phase two at some point. Fingers crossed. So who is, and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but not everybody was allowed to open back up. I know that, like, for example, massage places, certain bars that don't have certain licensing are going to stay stay closed. Phase two, any ideas of what phase two may look like when we get to that point in the road?
Yeah, so phase two in the White House plan, and remember the governor can make additions or changes to the White House plan. So that is sort of his guiding document for these three phases. He obviously has made a few additions and changes here and there, but the White House plan does start to open up some of those businesses with restrictions in place as to gathering size, things like that. So I think you will see those beginning to loosen. The big question I think that remains is when are we going to get there, right? I think, we're at a minimum going to be in phase 1 for probably 21 days. So it's another 3 weeks. The White House plan says 14 days is going to be the gating process. But I think what we were hearing yesterday is it's probably going to look like 21 days. And that's a best case scenario, right? That's saying that, with the little bit of loosening that comes in phase 1, and let's be real, it really is just a little bit of loosening. But when we get into that little bit of loosening, it's going to require that people are still being safe. People are making the right choices. They're wearing masks. They're washing their hands, doing all those things that we know are keeping us all healthy. Because if we get a spike, phase 2 doesn't necessarily happen, right?
So from an economic standpoint, you're comfortable talking economics with me.
Oh, just a little.
Just a little bit. From an economic standpoint, will phase 1, let me rephrase. How much economic stimulus will phase 1 provide our community?
It really depends on the industry, but I will say that we released our dashboard this morning. And one of the things that we noticed is, we do these dashboards week to week, right? And looking at the most recent week's data, commercial fuel sales have gone up, and
Good.
Fuel sales at gas stations have gone up, right? And that to me has got to be an indicator that there is going to be more commerce going on. People are putting gas in their cars, and whether that's because they're going to work or otherwise, they're buying something, right? So I think it's going to do something. It's going to be limited. I mean, we're not going to make up the hit that we have taken, for some time. But it's a start.
So I'm going to put a question on the back burner for you. We're not, unlike what I told Adam last week, we're not going to talk about meat supplies because the more I read about that, I don't want to make an artificial, everybody goes out and buys toilet paper panic.
That's very responsible of you.
So what I do want to put on the back burner though is, and I'm going to reserve this question for next week, whether it's you or Adam, is I've been getting asked about, okay, well, look, if we're in phase 1 on Friday, and that could be 21 days, 2 weeks, 21 days. Is there the possibility of an additional stimulus PPP allotment? I don't know if there's been discussions on that. And I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, Liz, but I'm going to wait and ask that question next week, not this week.
I can answer it now if you want.
Well, I would love for you to, if you want to answer it now, you go right ahead.
So here's what we're hearing. There's probably not going to be another PPP allotment. There may be another EIDL allotment, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So we and everybody else had predicted that the second tranche of the PPP was going to go like that, just as fast as the first tranche. People were absolutely lined up. There were people who had put in their applications after the money ran out. And so there was a huge line of people. And that first day's burn rate was $50 billion. When normally the burn rate, I hate to say normally, but the burn rate had been $30 billion, right? So we all thought it was going to go. But I think I heard yesterday, we looked at the statistics and there was like $100 billion left over. And so part of that is because some large companies, we've heard about these larger companies who applied for PPP dollars who have been giving it back. Part of it is because a lot of money actually came back to the PPP from those companies who had returned it. But also it just seems like the run on that money has slowed down. Now, that's not to say it's not going to run out.
Do we know why they returned it? Was it for, hey, we're not eligible, or hey, we don't need it?
It was because the PPP said that people have to make self-certifications saying that that money was necessary for them to continue their business operations in the context of the economic situation we all find ourselves in. And what the SBA eventually said is, look, we know some of these larger publicly traded companies technically met all of the conditions that we put on the PPP, but Congress's intent was really to use the PPP for small businesses. Right. And so they essentially asked these publicly traded companies that have, some good money, right? To please, consider giving that money back, and they would not be penalized.
You're putting it very nicely, by the way.
And so they have till May 14th to do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So that actually answered a huge question, and I'm glad you answered it.
Sure.
Let's transition. Let's transition a little bit into two topics that I know you wanted to talk about. One being childcare. What does that look like under our current, I guess, situation, and then phase one, and then lastly, the EBR Superintendent Search.
So you broke up a little bit asking your childcare question. So I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it for me.
No problem. So we're going to talk
Thanks.
about childcare and the search for EBR Superintendent.
Great.
So,
All right. I appreciate that. So, this is, I think, one of the most important issues about how do we reopen as we go from phase to phase to phase. Each phase presents its own challenges to childcare. But the big overarching things, I think, are two, right? One is that kids experience already something called the summer slide, where they lose some of the academic learning that they had gained over the course of their school year. And we see that 30% of the information that they learn over the school year can be lost in that 3-month summer period. And this is especially true, unfortunately, for low-income kids, for African-American kids, for Latino kids. And we are having the summer slide of all summer slides right now, right? Because school ended early. And while we have had distance learning, districts were a little bit slow to get to that distance learning. And not every kid has access to it. And even if they do have access to it because they were able to get a device either from school or they have one at home and they have connectivity, distance learning is something that is not necessarily the highest quality for all kids. It's not necessarily the right thing for all kids. They may not have an adult in the home who can help them to engage in their distance learning. So we're very concerned about the education loss that's taking place. The other side of this coin, of course, is you and I both know as parents of 4-year-olds, if you don't have somebody who can take care of your children, then you can't be at work. And
Right.
So what are we going to do to ensure that our kids are taken care of in a safe and healthy environment, and we can get back to work? And of course, the problems that we're seeing across this spectrum are manifold, right? School districts are not sure that they're going to reopen. If they are, they're not sure if they're going to be able to reopen early to try and provide some in-person learning opportunities for kids who maybe experience that summer slide. Daycares are having trouble. I mean, we saw information from the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, I think, that said that something like 60% of daycare centers are open, right? But that means 40% are not, and they're mainly serving the children of essential workers, and they are being hit just as much as any other small business when it comes to finances and all the other problems we're all facing, right? Access to PPE, pulling your employees back off of unemployment insurance and back to the workforce, right? There's so much going on. Plus, in phase one, your limitations on a student to teacher ratio are much lower. Well, you know that in a childcare center, they operate on incredibly thin margins that they're only able to have because they subsidize their young kids classes, their infant classes, right, with their toddler classes, right, which are bigger, but they can't have those bigger classes. So there's a lot of complicated stuff happening there. And then add to all of that, I certainly know that I would be looking right now to get my son started in a summer camp care program. And the summer camps are all going virtual. So right now, we're working with a lot of groups to try to figure out, how do we get through all of these barriers? What kind of innovative solutions can we come to so that we can solve the childcare problem and solve the education problem?
Well, that's scary. And I say that because it hits home. It does hit very close to home. Shannon and I's child, Fisher, and my niece Ivy, who is 5, were both at the office today. I have my office, she has her office, and I spend about 30 minutes to an hour with the kids, playing lawyer with them. So yeah, we're lucky in the sense that we can watch our kids and work at the same time. But man, if you work at LSU, you can't bring your kid to work necessarily, which does pose the question of, I wonder if certain employers are going to have to become flexible. with regard to childcare and creative for that matter. Definitely something to be concerned about. You know, in the beginning of all this, we hoped that it would be, okay, you're going back to school now. What's interesting to me though, has there been discussion about using the summer to make up some school, or was the decision pretty much, hey, we're done with school for now and we're just going to wait and start in the fall?
So I really hope that that will be part of the discussion. The Department of Education received about $290 million from the federal government to help districts respond to COVID-19. And so they released a plan, I think it's called Strong Start 2020. They released a plan on May 1st that is essentially a document guiding districts on how to engage in a competitive process to access that money, right? So they're going to give out $260 million. And so, you know, within that plan, there's obviously a lot of different things that they say you could use the money for, because COVID has just touched so much of what we're doing. But one of those things is, well, how do you recapture that learning? How do you expand and maximize learning time? And so there will be some funding available for it. Now, whether that funding is enough to be able to, you know, pay the teachers, get the PPE, sanitize the buildings, all of the many, many things that are going to happen, I don't know. But I do hope that we see opportunities for that taking place. I think it's just going to be so important for our kids to be able to recapture some of that learning time to keep them on track for what comes next. You know, you can never afford learning time. You certainly can't afford to lose this much.
So before we talk about our last topic, you just brought up something that reminded me that you guys did a webinar, if I'm not mistaken, today about how to reopen and what that looks like, right?
We did, yes.
So if they want to watch, if they missed that webinar like myself, and they want to watch it, where would be a good place to go and find that?
So you can find that at brac.org/recovery. At the very top of the page, there's a link to our Vimeo page, and all of our past webinars are listed there. We also, now that you've got me on webinars, we've got another one coming up on Wednesday with Mike Ricks from the SBA. He's the district director for the state of Louisiana, and he's going to come in and talk about PPP forgiveness. So for all of us who are wondering how we make sure we keep the right records, et cetera, like what are the rules to get forgiveness on the PPP, that's going to be Wednesday at 11 a.m. And then topically, next on Monday, we're going to have some folks in from the YMCA and from the Arts Council to talk about how they're standing up their summer camp programs and all of the different new protocols and procedures that they're putting into place to try and ensure both safety and fun for the kids and everything that we really need to have. So that'll be on Monday at 1 o'clock.
So it bears saying out loud that all of these resources that BRAC is providing the community right now is free. You don't need to be an investor. Although every single week I talk to you guys, I encourage folks to become an investor, to join up. I mean, the only thing that you don't get, and Adam dispelled that this last week, the only thing you don't get free is the Ask Adam series, which apparently is not happening anymore. So
it's not happening anymore. But, you know, if you email him a question, he's going to answer it. And so maybe that's why.
So it was very, I gotta tell you, and this is not us going off rails, but I enjoy talking to Adam, because one of the things we were talking about was what the legislature's ability to disrupt the stay-at-home order or not disrupt it. Mm-hmm. And I had to quickly say, I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not doing that to you. I'm not putting you on the spot. And he's just looking at me. And if you know Adam well enough, I got that, and I knew I just needed to move on. So I deeply, though joking aside, I deeply appreciate everything BRAC's doing. And and anybody watching this, please, please, please consider becoming an investor in the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. Last topic. We got a little bit of time. So unbeknownst to a lot of us, the superintendent search for EBR kind of started back up again. And there was a development, last week with regard to them starting the final interviews, right?
Yes, there was. I'm so excited about this. So, they had kind of put their search on hiatus during all of this COVID stuff because they were hoping they'd be able to get in-person interviews set up. And that just ended up, it's off the table. The timeline was just not working. So last week they did video interviews with each of the 5 semifinalist candidates, and they dropped them on their YouTube page on Friday. So I spent 7.5 hours of my weekend watching these interviews. And I got to tell you, it is really remarkable, the group of people that we have interested in being the superintendent for East Baton Rouge Parish. We have some just incredible people, and coming from all over the United States, from as far west as California, as far east as Florida, with deep experience and focus on equity and making sure that kids have differentiated learning, and who have done a lot of work to improve schools that have been chronically low performing, and to really focus on those schools and have an incredible vision for what we can do. I would encourage folks, I don't know that everybody has 7.5 hours to watch those videos, but the school system is taking feedback.
Okay.
And they have a survey up on their website. You can go to their YouTube page and you can watch these videos and just spend a few minutes watching each one of them. Spend 20 minutes or 10 minutes watching each one of them and get a feel for the kinds of individuals that we have who see potential in Baton Rouge. It's worth your time.
If you have time to watch Tiger King on Netflix, you have time to watch the EBR superintendent interviews, which may not be nearly as entertaining, but definitely more relevant. What is the next step for their process?
So they are going to vote to narrow down their field of candidates on May the 21st. So
Okay.
You've got until, I think, next Monday, which is the 18th, to watch the videos and provide feedback. And then 3 days later, they're going to have that vote on the 21st. I'm not sure if they're narrowing down to 2 candidates, 3 candidates. I actually don't know. But, as we were just talking about, childcare, especially right now, and education for kids, especially right now, is a very, very complicated thing. And so it is absolutely imperative that this person have a vision, have a plan, be a risk taker, be bold and innovative and able to change and flex in these situations. I mean, it's more critical than it ever was, and it was already critical, right? So
I like the word disruptive, but I hear you. Are you guys, and again, I'm not putting you on the spot, Adam or Liz, do you guys have any literature or information on which candidates you guys kind of have thoughts on, or is that not necessarily something BRAC's doing this?
No, we haven't been doing
Okay.
that. We had been sharing information with the school board members and with our investors about the kinds of characteristics we were looking for. And so when I
Perfect.
say we've got a really strong pool of candidates, it really is remarkable how
Good.
talented these folks are. So, I might personally lean one way or another, but that's not fodder for this.
Well, and look, it's always a good situation where you're like, hey, these candidates really would all do great, and so that's a good place to be in. And candidly, we deserve that. Our kids deserve that. So anything else we need to talk about, Liz, before I let you back to your busy day?
Just thank you so much for having me on, Franz. And please, everybody, visit brac.org/recovery.
So for more information about BRAC, go to that website. For more information about Geaux Rouge, go to www.gauxrouge.com. Additionally, if you want to email us topics to ask BRAC about, not to stomp them, but more so if, like, for example, the PPP question, you can email me at info@gauxrouge.com, and I'll make sure that whoever I'm talking to, I ask the question. Liz, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you guys next week.